Welcome to Brew Builds, your place for DIY home improvements. I'm Paul. Today I'll be moving an outdoor hose bib to a new location using PEX tubing. Let's get to this. We've been wanting to relocate this outdoor faucet for a while now, and doing the patio remodel seemed like a good time to do it. I wanted to make sure that I got it done before I started moving too fast and ended up forgetting to bury the tubing. So I left myself a note. So I'm going to take a break from the patio remodel and get this tubing buried and the hose bib located inside this garden area.
Tools and items needed: 1/2-inch PEX tubing, tubing cutter, PEX depth gauge, 1/2-inch Sharkbite ball valve and hose bib, a Sawzall, a drill driver, a pick, a trench shovel, copper tubing cutter, plastic conduit, utility knife, protective foam, steel wool or sandpaper, and a torch.
Now I already broke up the concrete where I needed to when I broke up the concrete slab.
On the brew scale, technical ability I rate a little higher than a novice because I'll need to modify a copper connection. Physical ability I rate fairly easy, but this is somewhat dependent on how much dirt you need to dig.
Time to start digging. I need to dig down about 12 inches to protect the PEX tubing from the patio pavers above. And while I'm digging, hit the like button and subscribe if you want to see more DIY videos like this one. Alright, so I got the trenches dug here. I got the one that will go to the hose bib over there, and then there's another one that I dug for the irrigation for this area here. Now, for the hose bib, I'll be using this PEX tubing, and then I'll be covering it with this foam. Now, they say you can bury this in the dirt, but they do recommend that you protect it. So you bury it in sand, or I decided to use this stuff because it can contract and expand from the water temperature, and that can cause a little bit of rubbing, which potentially can make a hole in 15 years from now. So might as well protect it. Now we don't have any issues of freezing here, but I figure this is pretty cheap protection. So I'm choosing to run the PEX as one continuous line with no connections. I've did some research and they say when you use a brass connector you have to wrap it and protect it from the soil. And then I figure why put something in the line that you're going to bury that has potential of leaking. And so when the PEX is out of the ground, I have some plastic conduit that I'll be using to protect it. Now you probably could just leave it in the foam and that would protect it from the UV rays, but this doesn't seem very durable compared to this, and apparently I have some things around here that like to chew on plastic and foam. So I'm going to install this Sharkbite ball valve that I'll be using to transition from the copper to the new PEX tubing. I thought it'd be good to have the ability to be able to shut off the water if you needed it. So make sure that you have the water turned off at the main before you do any work on the plumbing. Once you got it turned off, go ahead and open up the faucet and let the water drain out. Now we can go cut this tube. Alright, I'm going to use this little tubing cutter.
So I need to cut the tube about 5 inches away from the elbow, and then once it is cut I will rotate the elbow 90 degrees by re-sweating the joint.
So I like to tighten this about a quarter turn, a little less for each rotation that I do. It's probably closer to an eighth of a turn. And it's just about through. Then you want to clean the copper before you put the Sharkbite on. Hey, before I move on, I'm going to give you a quick demonstration on Sharkbite fittings. Now, I started using these about 10 years ago when some copper lines in our house failed and they had to be replaced. They are truly amazing compared to having to sweat a copper joint, especially for DIYers like myself. With just a few precautions, they will work great. Copper tubing needs to be perfectly round and not have any blemishes or imperfections in it. Then you're going to want to clean it with some steel wool or some light sandpaper. Then you take the Sharkbite depth gauge, and this basically shows you how deep the Sharkbite fitting needs to go.
You can also use this tool to ream the outer edge.
Then you take your fitting and push the fitting on to that mark. What's nice about Sharkbite fittings is they're actually removable, so you take this little removal tool and you push on the plastic sleeve as you pull off the connector. And it just comes right off like that. And they're reusable as long as the O-ring inside doesn't get damaged and it stays lubricated. Since PEX tubing is the same diameter as copper tubing, it's very easy to use these fittings to transition from copper to PEX. Just make sure the PEX is clean, and then taking the Sharkbite depth gauge, mark it, and then just push on the PEX into the fitting until that mark. There you go. But before I get to use this, I get to use this. So I'm going to have to heat up the old copper tubing and rotate the elbow 90 degrees. Now it's been a while since I've had to sweat a copper connection, but I do know the most important thing is to make sure there's no water in the line or you're never going to get the solder to melt. Let's go do this. So I'm going to rotate this 90 degrees before I put the end on. So a sweat joint is a term plumbers use for connecting two pieces of copper together. And you actually use solder that goes in between the two pieces of copper, and that's what seals it.
So you want to use a pair of pliers to hold it. And then as I heat up the connector, I'll start wiggling the pliers a little. And you do need to heat up around the tube a little bit. And once you feel it starting to loosen, then you can rotate it to 90 degrees and let go of the pliers, and voila. I know it seems redundant, but it's always a good idea to use the depth gauge tool every time you put a connector on.
And make sure you get it all the way up to the mark. Turn it off, and I'm going to turn the water on and see if we're leaking. I like to turn it on just a little bit and then go check for leaks. If it looks good, then I'll come back and turn it on all the way.
Alright, good, no leaks. I'm going to turn it on just a little. And now I go wash my hands. Alright, cool. Let's move on. So I'm going to lay the PEX tubing into the trench. Whoa, what's that? Glad I had my boots on. So I'm going to lay this PEX out into the trench, and then I'll cut it approximately. You know, one thing that's nice about PEX is that it curves, and so you don't have to put elbows everywhere.
So sunlight and UV rays are very damaging to PEX tubing, so I'm going to take this and go put it back in the garage right now. So I'm going to do 20 inches on this end for the conduit.
When plastic tubing has a lot of words on it, it's very easy just to kind of note where you need to cut it and not actually mark it.
So 20 inches is right on the beginning of the end of the word conduit. Alright, so I already have it marked here. And then this piece will go on this way. And then I cut this little piece to seal the top. I got it to the mark, you can see.
And slide the conduit all the way up into the ball valve, and then we'll move the foam all the way up to the plastic conduit, and then just make sure everything is nice and square.
Alright, quick recap of what I've done so far. We dug the trenches for the new PEX tubing, and then I cut the old copper tubing and rotated it at the elbow 90 degrees. Added in the Sharkbite ball valve. We put the PEX tubing in with the foam protective cover, and then I added this plastic conduit to protect the PEX when it's out of the ground so it doesn't get damaged by the UV rays. Alright, let's get over to the hose bib side and get this DIY project finished.
Alright, so this conduit I'll make about 30 inches. So 30 inches is between the E and the M of NEMA. Alright, I'm going to carefully cut the foam. Do not want to cut the PEX tubing. And then I'm going to take it out of the hole. There we go. Alright, now we'll put on the conduit.
I'm going to want the hose bib to attach to this fence right about here. So I'll need to cut the tubing. And then of course mark it.
Now I'll put this on first before I attach it to the fence here to make it easier.
So now I'll attach the hose bib valve using some brass door hinge screws that I had lying around. That way they don't rust.
Alright, let's turn on and check for leaks.
And no leaks.
Alright, I need to make a little wooden spacer here so I can attach this. So I cut this piece of 2x6 redwood that I found that matches the fence nicely because it's kind of old too. But I'm going to pre-drill the holes before screwing it in so it doesn't split.
So I'm going to use a self-tapping screw here. It's more like a lag bolt, and that will help hold the bracket.